Greetings, outcasts, freethinkers, narrative questioners, dot connectors, and genuinely open-minded and outright curious inhabitants of whatever realm we exist in at the moment. You are about to embark on another free first-hour episode of The Melt. If you find yourself wanting to dig deeper and have the desire to join the conversation during our monthly Melt meetups, you might want to consider becoming a monthly subscriber. For as little as 3 lousy Babylon hokey-pokey tokens per month, you can have access to full-length, early, and exclusive episodes. Just visit patreon.com/themeltpodcast or click the link in the episode notes to set the process in motion. It's simple, painless, and very well might make you feel tingly inside. So without further ado, please enjoy the show!
This is Hunter Muse.
And this is Chris Snipes, and you are listening
to The Melt.
The majority of the people in the world are good. They trust their government, they trust the news, they trust their doctor, they trust the experts. They simply can't fathom the behavior of anyone who would put themselves before others. And this is a good thing. It shows us that they themselves are good people who find it difficult to fathom what the psychopaths who run this world are capable of. Yet this does not stop the unfathomable from occurring. Sometimes it's important to know what psychopaths are capable of so that you can know it when you see it and do what is necessary to avoid those psychopaths and anyone associated with them. But there are certain situations where choice never enters into the equation. You get born into a situation and find yourself subjected to the cruelty of the wicked. There's only 2 things that one can do when dealt with a hand of cards such as that. Perpetuate the cruelty, or do whatever you can to not only stop the cycle, but try to prevent it from happening to others. Today's guest, MK Ultra survivor Cathy O'Brien, has done just that. She's recently been the subject of an excellent documentary called Trance, Mind Control, Human Slavery, and Healing the Nation, and has written 3 books. Hunter starts off the conversation by asking Cathy about her origin story.
Well, knowledge is our defense against mind control, and it's been suppressed under the 1947 National Security Act. Ever since the National Security Act and the CIA were formed, the CIA was heavily involved in MK Ultra mind control. The Project Paperclip brought over the Nazi and fascist scientists into the U.S., and with them came the information that Himmler research had found on the effects of trauma on the human mind for mind control purposes. So MK Ultra mind control came over with them, and it was being formulated by the CIA into a more powerful form of mind control because now we had technology to add to it. Television was a big thing coming on so strong back then, and they had that technology. But they also had information that the Catholics had learned about the effects of trauma on the human mind. So there's no it the history into the infiltration into the churches, whether they're cult or occult, has been very strong all along. And actually, the Catholic Church was involved with Hitler back in the day. But the Hitler-Himmler research had found that trauma is the perfect basis of mind control because it's how our brains respond to trauma. It's like our conscious mind freezes in fright, and the subconscious mind is left wide open to being easily led and manipulated. So trauma is used for mind control purposes. And when we understand that one piece of the puzzle right there, it gives us a clearer idea of what in the world is going on these days. It's been going on a long, long time. And like I said, it came over with Project Paperclip into the US and was being implemented strong by the time that I was born in 1957 in Muskegon, Michigan. Mm-hmm. My parents had been sexually abused and ritually abused, and they were sexually abusing me. So the multi-generational incest part of my past is what made me a prime candidate or a target for MK Ultra mind control. My father was caught sending child pornography of me through the U.S. mails. And he was told he could receive immunity from prosecution if he would agree to sell me into MK Ultra mind control. I was about 3 years old. I mean, this was the very, very early 60s. Mm. And we're already seeing how our justice system was being used and eroded to allow for the proliferation of pedophilia back then for so-called reasons of national security. That same national security blanket's going on today, and it's being used the same way. And that's why people are wondering what in the world is going on, because pertinent information on mind-brain function was being suppressed from society in order for the secret knowledge to be used on people like myself who were targeted for MK Ultra mind control. My mother's family was involved in a Blue Masonic Lodge. And the Blue Masonic Lodge, of course, if you got secrets, you need a secret society. And, right. You know, so it went. And all the local politicians and everybody were at my grandfather's Blue Masonic Lodge, including politician by the name of Gerald Ford, who was just a local politician back then. Mm-hmm. But Gerald Ford approached my father and told him he could receive immunity from prosecution. And that was how my father only had a sixth grade education and earned his living as a worm digger until he sold me in the project. Then he got lucrative military contracts for cooperating, and he was rewarded in so many ways. So we're seeing this political corruption starting to come in already. And of course, Gerald Ford went on to become the unelected president of the United States. And as his political career escalated, so too did my victimization in MK Ultra mind control. The project that I was targeted for was called Project Monarch. Mm-hmm. It's a genetic mind control study because the Hitler-Himmler research had found that after 3 generations, behaviors, beliefs, abuse, they all become autogenic in the brain. That's how our brains work. And that information too, has been suppressed to a large degree so that it could be used against us. And so I was targeted for that. And I was always subjected to those aspects, the genetic mind control aspects and the effects of the 3 generations and what that means. Because after their sexual abuse of a child and their conscious mind freezes in fear and the subconscious is wide open to being easily led, because our subconscious doesn't have the necessary filters, the logic, the ability to question and reason. So it's just easily led. And after 3 generations of that kind of abuse, because pedophilia is the worst trauma the Hitler-Himmler research had found. And with the conscious mind frozen in fear after 3 generations, babies are born compliant And that's exactly what was needed for this New World Order slave society agenda. Adolf Hitler first termed it the New World Order in back then. And of course, George Bush and now Joe Biden term it the New World Order. We need to pay attention to what this New World Order is really all about. It is a slave society agenda, and it is based on trauma. That's why these days we are just receiving trauma after trauma after trauma. Their brains are just frozen in fear, negativity is immobilizing, and they're having a hard time responding to what's going on and taking a stand against it. In the meantime, the children are being targeted. That's what the pedophile agenda is all about, our so-called gender confusion, and all these other sexualizations of children. But the point is the children are being targeted because of this multi-generational slave society agenda that's been going on my whole life. And I witnessed it being put into play while I was deep in the swamp in Washington, D.C., under their MK Ultra mind control, being forced to work for these perpetrators. So I witnessed and experienced a lot, beginning with the fact that I was targeted for mind control because I'd been sexually abused by my father.
So your mother's side of the family, they were in the Blue Masonic Lodge.
Yes.
And do you believe that your grandfather had been molested or experienced sexual abuse as a child, or was he the beginning of the cycle?
I'm not real sure how far back it goes from there, but he was in the military, and then when he came back home, he was in the opened the Blue Masonic Lodge, and he was certainly sexually abusing me. I know he sexually abused my mother. It was just the way things were to me growing up. I thought while I still had any free thought of my own, I thought that that's just the way society was. And I remember wishing as a little tiny child, like 5 years old, wishing there was some place in the world where people didn't hurt each other all the time and where people were kind to each other and kind to animals, because the people I was around who abuse children and abuse people, abuse animals, because it's like no regard for life at all. And the two always, go together. So, when we see animals being abused, we need to look at the kids. When we see kids being abused, we need to check those animals, because a lot of times the abuse is the same. And seeing pets hurt to a child is very traumatic. And
Exactly.
again, adds to the trauma of leaving them highly suggestible and easily led for MK Ultra mind control.
It's interesting because my grandfather was in the Navy and he was a 31st degree Mason, and he had kind of a nefarious career in the Navy, career Navy man. And my mother had issues her entire life. Obviously wouldn't ever admit to any sexual abuse in the family, because in the time that she was born in 1941 in the South, you didn't talk about what your neighbors were doing. And if your neighbors saw you beating your child, they shut the shutters and they said nothing. So it really seems like it was rife and a fertile breeding ground for predators to take advantage of children and animals, because no one was going to say anything, especially if you had a military background. They weren't going to call you out on that. And I think that really kind of sets the stage for these other generations that follow, because you learn to keep your mouth shut. There's just certain things you don't talk about.
Well, mind control was used on and by the U.S. military. So they certainly were familiar with it, either from their own experience or from actually applying it in psychological warfare in the course of war. So then they brought that back home. And whether they were consciously inflicting it or not, either way, the result was the same. Add to that the idea, well, you're not supposed to be talking about politics, and you're not supposed to talk about abuse and this and that. Of course, we're told that, but also the brain compartmentalizes the memory and it represses it. The neuron pathways of the brain actually physically shut down with the trauma. Like my father's sexual abuse, my brain shut down those neuron pathways around the trauma so the rest of my mind could function normally. Then when my father came in to sexually abuse me, it would open back up. Those neuron pathways would trigger open, and the part of me that knew how to deal with his abuse would do it again and again as needed. Well, this kind of compartmentalization of memory after so many different abuses, the neuron pathways in the brain are shutting down, leaving a person more and more and more suggestible the more abuses that occur. So over here, where this is like the mind's sane defense to trauma too horrible to comprehend. It's a protection mechanism of our brain that once we understand it, we can control that. And but back then, I mean, it's an automatic response system of our brain that we're all born with, because my father was sexually abusing me in infancy. And I certainly couldn't think to judge what he was doing was wrong or anything like that. But my brain knew the pain and the suffocation of his sexual abuse. So my brain compartmentalized that memory, and then so the rest of my mind can function normally. I lost more and more and more free thought as I was thrust into MK Ultra mind control, because my father was immediately flown to Boston, Massachusetts, where he was trained by cardinal law of the infamous Catholic child abuse scandal, which is a very deliberate MK Ultra mind control abuse of children, knowing the pedophilic agenda and the effects of that trauma on the human mind. They were very much a part of working with the MK Ultra mind control program because they wanted to be the one world church in the new world order. It's certainly not just the Catholics. As we all know, it's expanded into, I don't know of any religion that's not been infiltrated or affected. I think every sacred walk of society that we have has been infiltrated now with MK Ultra mind control to some degree, just due to the secrecy that has gone on for so long. And this is why truth really makes us free, and why it's so important that we get this truth brought out so that people have the knowledge that is our defense against mind control. As soon as my father was trained by cardinal law how to manipulate my subconscious mind with neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, the language of the subconscious, which is pretty much literals and more of a literal interpretation of things. I was also subjected to a lot of occult ritual from that point forward. So that also came into play. And it wasn't used as a religious belief per se as much as it was used as a blood trauma base, because blood traumas, of course, are very traumatic, especially to a child prior to age 5 while their brain is still forming. So then I had another compartment for that. I had a compartment for the pornography my father was using me in. I had a compartment for the human trafficking that he was doing. It wasn't called that back then, but he was prostituting me out to the people in the Masonic Lodge. So then I had that part. And then the political aspect comes in, and it felt to me there was no place to turn for help. I mean, not the politicians, not my church, not my community, not my family, my relatives. There was nowhere that I could turn. So I just thought it's the way the world was. And as I lost more and more free thought, by around the age of 6, it was sufficient to where I just did what I was told to do and follow orders. And that involved a lot of sexual abuse, a lot of pedophilia, a lot of blackmail of politicians, and a lot of witnessing what the New World Order agenda was all about, because the brain photographically records events surrounding trauma.
Right.
And because of that, my brain was photographically recording conversations, even ones that I didn't understand the gravity of so much back then. But as I grew a little bit older, it became somewhat clearer when I would hear Gerald Ford talk about someone like Margaret Trudeau, who was MK Ultra mind control slave, same level that I was. And I knew Pierre Trudeau was a pedophile because, I mean, he was sexually assaulting me, manipulating my mind. He was an MK Ultra mind control master extraordinaire of individuals and of nations. So that they get together back then at Mackinac Island, Michigan, the governor's mansion, which was the governor at the time was George Romney, who was Mitt Romney's father. So we're seeing they keep this in their generations too, because, you know, it's kind of like how doctors used to run in families and shoemakers ran, you know.
Right.
So they want to keep this New World Order agenda in their bloodline and in their families, so we can start seeing this pattern starting to form. But so I was exposed to Pierre Trudeau, and, you know, raises questions in my mind. Is Justin Trudeau like his father or like his mother? And who is his father anyway? Because she was an MK Ultra sex slave, you know, and I think that was rather clear in retrospect to anyone. You know, once your eyes are open to it, you start seeing it. And then it raises these questions. You know, it's like, okay, regardless of who his biological father is, Pierre Trudeau still raised him. And I know how violently sexually brutal he is, you know, so what does that say about him? We need to start factoring this into the equation in politics. We need to factor it into the equation and really all facets of society, and especially education. We need to realize all that. But back then in Mackinac Island, Michigan, I heard quite a bit of discussion going on mind control of a nation and mind control through the generations by altering the knowledge base of the children in the education system. That was a primary focus of George Romney back in the day. So I had that groundwork as a child, which led me right into, when I was in Washington, D.C., to be working under the Education Secretary, Bill Bennett and Lamar Alexander, and being witness to the implementation of global education, Common Core education, this indoctrination of children that picked up where Hitler's youth education left off. You know,
so were you going to school when you were a little girl, and were there any signs to any adults whatsoever that something was going on? I feel so upset that there was no one that intervened. Like no one was a safe person for you. So did your teachers notice this bifurcation of your or disassociation of your brain at all?
I think so. And it was just more like, you're daydreaming again. You know, you're gazing out the window, daydreaming. Pay attention, you know, more like that. So since people didn't understand what to look for in the signs of mind control, instead they thought I was just an excellent student because I memorized everything and got straight A's. You know, it was just, so that didn't catch their attention that there was abuse going on at home. And we need to start understanding the mind-brain function that's been suppressed under national security ever since the National Security Act was formed. That information is our birthright. We have a right to know and a need to know that information. And it's absurd that this has been suppressed from society for so long.
Yeah, especially when it's so insidious and pervasive in so many aspects of society. I think it's just so hard to grasp for everyday folks to think that things like this are taking place, that they just, It's so easy to turn a blind eye and just deny that it exists. And now, since it's conveniently under the category of conspiracy theory, thanks to QAnon,
Right.
yeah, everybody can just write it off as just some right-wing craziness and not, have to pay attention to it for a little while longer.
That's true. That people are easily diverted so that they dismiss it, because really, who wants to believe this information?
Of course.
And my owner in MK Ultra Mind Control since I was 13 years old was U.S. Senator Robert C. Byrd, and he was in office for over 50 years, head of appropriations, very powerful positions within the Senate, deciding where money was going to be spent and everything else. And Senator Byrd often said to the other perpetrators and those around, "Oh, good people don't think to look for this kind of criminal activity." And he said that often, and it was like, it's so true. Good people don't think to look for this, and good people don't want to believe that we share this planet with such a dark energy force, such a controlling, hateful, fear-mongering, these people that are hell-bent on implementing this new world order. But the good news is it is only a handful of them. They just appear to be more than they are, because the media has been their voice since, all along. They've been using the media. And because they have this media voice, they're like the proverbial wizard behind the curtain, pulling levers, appearing to be great and powerful, when all we need to do is pull that curtain back and see, oh, it's the same people over and over and over again, the same handful of perpetrators. You look at Gerald Ford's cabinet, for example, and he had Henry Kissinger, Nelson Rockefeller, George Bush, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, and Jack Valenti was his press secretary, who was head of the Motion Picture Association of America, and decided what we were going to be told through the controlled media. So we've had this structure come into place for a long time. And Gerald Ford was the unelected president of the United States, who was given that position because he covered up the Kennedy assassination. And he did it with the Warren Commission. At that time, anybody who questioned the Warren Commission was considered a conspiracy theorist. That's where that term started, was way back then. And so here's, the same handful of perpetrators, the same New World Order agenda, the same mind manipulation, the same name calling of conspiracy theory that's going on today. And it's because people haven't been able to see beyond this illusion, because they didn't know it was an illusion. They didn't understand that now the knowledge that's our defense against mind control, because it's been suppressed under national security. So it's gone on for so long. It was suppressed from society, from education, even from mental health. It's been suppressed very deliberately all along, and they've been operating on the philosophy that secret knowledge equals power. Well, they only have as much power as we give them. They only have as much power as we let them steal. And it's up to us to raise awareness and bring this truth to light, because truth frees us from the fear. It really does set us free, and it empowers us to reclaim our free thought and retain our free thought going forward, once we understand the simple components of MK Ultra Mind Control that are being implemented on a global scale today through trauma after trauma after trauma.
Well, it's so interesting to see how this got ramped up around the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
How the free love hippie movement was really weaponized, and the objectification and sexualization of children got really ramped up in that period too. And so, under the guise of freedom, polyamory, living in communes, and living in this situation where children are being used as sex objects. You saw it so much in film at that time. And I saw this great documentary about the making of Easy Rider. And Dennis Hopper said that the CIA was on the set, that they were working on the set of that film. So I think you look at movies like Pretty Baby, where they're showing prostitute child, Brooke Shields is a child prostitute, again, or Taxi Driver, where we're trying to normalize little girls being sex objects. And these are films that were funded in Hollywood and shown worldwide. And I remember thinking, like, as a child, this is wrong. Like, I think what you're saying is so correct, that there's a part of the brain where cognitive dissonance kicks in, and you just innately know that what's happening is wrong, that this is not what children are supposed to do. This is not the role children are supposed to play. So how did you find other people that were in the program? Were you, like, when you were sent to the White House, were there other girls there? Were you isolated, or were there other people in these environments that you knew were going through the same thing that you were going through?
I saw many others that were going through the same thing, but we didn't really talk with each other. It wasn't allowed, because we might inadvertently trigger each other, or mess up a program or an operation that was going on at that particular time. So one girl that I had been trafficked with quite frequently, I saw her after I had been healing and reached out hoping to maybe affect her. And she said, "No one would believe the things I can't remember. No one would believe the things I can't remember." There are so many different ways that people are crying out for help and aren't heard because mind control isn't understood. We see so much of it right in front of our faces every day, the outcry for help. And we need to start understanding what mind control looks like. And mind control was my whole environment. So it seemed to me that the whole world was made up of those who marched to orders and those who gave them. It was pretty much structured that way. And it was I was so fortunate to wake up to the good side of life, to realize that good people are by far the majority in this world.
Absolutely.
So I'm waking up to the good side of life, going, "Oh my gosh, this is so amazing. We're the majority." And people need to never take their free thought for granted, and celebrate their freedom to live true to soul with strength of spirit and live their life's purpose. It's such an amazing thing that we all have. And when I first woke up from mind control and saw people taking that for granted, I wondered how they could possibly take something so sacred for granted. I certainly don't. I never have. Ever since I woke up, I celebrate my freedom every single day. I'm so grateful for it. And I'm going to keep living love and bringing truth to light, because I'm free to do so. And really, everybody should have that responsibility. To me, responsibility is the ability to respond. And it comes with free thought. We're not frozen in fear anymore. We're able to think free. We're able to see the solution and respond to what's going on, respond to the human trafficking, respond to what's going on in our school system, respond to the pervasiveness of ritual abuse. And stop the human trafficking that is the number one funding mechanism of the New World Order, and is one of the most lucrative businesses in the world. So we can respond to this and stop it and start making a difference right in our own backyard and start daring to care again. But that all comes with free thought. Responsibility, for me, it's the most wonderful thing, because I can think to respond. If I have the ability to respond, that is such a freedom in itself. And everybody will feel that way once they reclaim their free thought, but they've got to get this negativity, this immobilizing negativity out of their brain, shut off their TV, learn to think further, expand their thinking, and get out in society and start talking with each other again. It's happening. I'm so happy to see people finally waking up, but it needs to happen faster. We need to get this going faster so we can start positively reaching out to the many who are suffering and waiting and wishing that someone would hear that mind control is so prevalent.
Well, the occult aspects of these programs, were they in allegiance to some deity or some entity or something like that? Or were these basically just structures that these rituals were built around, and they were kind of going through the motions because it was some sort of technology that worked to traumatize people in your situation?
More that than anything, because the CIA was heavily involved in Satanism and using it as a trauma base for mind control. Mm-hmm. So it was very, very much structured to the point where my primary MK Ultra mind control programmer was Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino, the founder of the occult Temple of Set, proliferating on our military bases. That's used as a trauma base for mind control right there on our military personnel, because the blood traumas are horrific, and that kind of abuse of people is extremely traumatic. So it was very much used that way. Lieutenant Aquino was caught in the Presidio child abuse scandal, the Marin County child abuse scandal. He was caught so many times being involved in mind control. He'd wear his little dramatic satanic attire and be on Geraldo or something and brag about what he was doing, And people didn't realize the magnitude of the fact that he didn't believe in the power of Satan. He believed in the power of himself. He believed in his ability to traumatize people and manipulate their subconscious mind using NLP, mind control programming. He was tied in so high at the top with the Bushes and the ones who were really pushing this through so strong for the New World Order agenda. He felt totally protected and was just very arrogant and boastful about his role in all of that. But he absolutely did not believe in any kind of power of Satan, because so many of these perpetrators that I was exposed to are not spiritual. They're not like us. They're not like us, and they don't like us. And they don't have the same kind of feeling. Even you don't get a sense of like the good or the evil or whatever that you would associate with solar spirit. Instead, they're like cold, ice cold, just very different from us. But nevertheless, people right here, right now that are within our realm to affect, we just need to realize that we have the power to stop following these self-appointed leaders that we didn't elect and stop complying with their traumas and their demands. It's absurd how far they have been able to take their formula, their very scientific, very deliberate formula for traumatization and mind manipulation of the subconscious mind. They've taken it a long way.
I'd love to talk about social media and the cell phone, and that as a device that is being used for mind control. Do you think that there's an element there that is reinforcing the objectification of not only women and children now, but now young men, men, period, are being objectified too and sexualized? Do you think that there is a mind control element in the phone that is tracking eye movement, or somehow the EMF is creating a mesmerism that's happening when you're on the phone?
Yeah, definitely. It's a hypnotic device in many ways. And it's also a fooler, because some people feel like they're actually making a difference in the world by saying, no, you're wrong, and a little social media statement, and it's not really accomplishing anything. You
Yeah.
need to put down the phone, get out in society and start interacting and having human interaction, because the other devices are being used to control their information, number one, because information control is a form of mind control. Mind control is a sliding scale from robotic MK Ultra mind control like I experienced to information control, because we all formulate our thoughts, opinions, and actions based on what we know. And we need to know that knowledge base has been altered for a long, long time, like the National Security Act suppressing pertinent information on mind-brain function. There's so much information that we're not being told. And then we will see some hardcore facts come up of what in the world is going on, and then nothing is done about it. And it's like, nothing to see here, folks, and distract. They'll come up with a different diversion to take people away from what they were looking at. It's like, oh, Hunter Biden's laptop, what is that about? No, nothing to see here. There's nothing to it, So we've got to realize that the secrecy has been misleading people for a long time and inhibiting our ability to respond. So we need to start thinking free, expand our thinking beyond what we think we know, and start researching things for ourselves. I'm sure people are onto the fact that fact checkers are the same people who are censoring truth and diluting truth and diverting us from truth. It's the same people. So, we need to start researching for ourselves, get truth back into education, and realize that we've got about 3 generations of altered knowledge base now in humanity due to the global education system. Notice I call it global education because it is a worldwide basis for the new world order, where a handful of big guys make all the money and we do all the work. Follow the money. It goes to the same people. It's just the same ones over and over again. And they're controlling what we know. We need to start thinking further. And that was something I definitely had to do when I woke up from mind control, because I had 30 years where I couldn't think free at all. And I had to learn to think for myself and formulate thoughts and get my brain firing in new directions.
I was really surprised. I took a media studies class 2 semesters ago, and one of the first questions they asked in the class is, where do you get your news? And literally every person in the class said CNN. Every single person in my class, including the professor, said that they got their news from CNN. And then we did a section on fact checking, and all of the students were saying, well, if the fact checker on Facebook says that this story isn't true, if I go to Snopes and they say the story isn't true, then that story is not true. And so I did some research and I showed the class who funded all of these fact checkers. And 100% of the time it was Facebook, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Merck, and this is in the middle of the pandemic. And I just was saying to my class, like, don't you see that the person who's giving you the information is the person who controls the information? That you have to take that extra step and say, what you just said, follow the money. So if Facebook is giving a fact checker $50 million in a grant, then maybe they are controlling the data that's coming through Facebook. So the fact checker is just an algorithm. It's not even a real person that you could sit there and say, oh, it's Joe Bob that's giving me that information. So I think that's the thing that I have examined, is that we are complicit if we don't take a step back. If we don't take responsibility for where we get our information, then we are complicit in that lie.
Yes, and we need to pay attention to anything that goes into our head, whether it's in the so-called education system or the music industry. What lyrics are coming in on the harmonics. The harmonics vibrate the neuron pathways of our brain. And it's like why people can listen to a song and say, oh, remember we fell in love to that song, and have kind of a swish moment over it, because the brain, it takes them back to that, because the vibration can do that. So we need to be very careful what lyrics are going into our head on that music. We need to pay attention to video games, because they were designed to erode critical analysis free thought in our soldiers. That's where it originated, so that they could point and shoot without compassion or without giving thought, and they could shoot faster, So this kind of conditioning has been coming into society for some time, and it's going to take a while to overcome it. But I know from my own life's experience that soul is stronger than genetics. So no matter if we've got the three generations of genetics, soul's stronger, we win, we can overcome it. And then 3 generations going forward in light of free thought, oh my gosh, I'm so excited where we're going, because we're on that path right now. We just got to expand it even more, accelerate it faster, and get more people awake and aware of what's going on, and doing exactly what you just said, where we point out to each other how to think further, how to research for ourselves, how not to just buy into the programmed narrative, and to be able to expand that thought. So it's I am so fortunate that intelligence insider Mark Phillips was working the highest levels of mind sciences, studying how to preserve the sanctity of free thought. That was his interest and his goal, and learning about mind-brain function. And Mark was a spook, which means he was above the intelligence agencies. He could wear whatever hat he needed to be where he needed to be at any given time, whether it was Secret Service or CIA or, all the way down to FBI, or whatever he needed to be, he could be it. And so that he was in the right place at the right time. Well, he had access to this information he found buried under national security, simple mind-brain function on how to overcome trauma, how to reclaim free thought after extreme torture and mind manipulation. This information was buried there, so that, like when spies were caught and tortured or something, that they could actually heal from that and get back out in the field. So, it is government information that's used on the highest levels for the most horrific forms of trauma. But no matter what level of trauma we're exposed to, our brains respond to that trauma the same. And likewise, our brains can heal from that trauma the same. Well, Mark Phillips saw this going on and being suppressed. And it's like, this is our birthright. This is just something everybody has a right to know. Why is this being suppressed from society? Why is this being suppressed from education and mental health, of all things? There's so many traumas that people endure. They need to have this pertinent information. He could not release the information, though, because he was bound by laws of sedition and wasn't able to do that. What he did do, though, is he was outraged that while he was studying mind sciences at the War College in the Psychological Warfare Division, that Lieutenant Colonel Meglio is right there studying how to use trauma to control people's minds. And I mean, they became arch enemies right from the get-go.
Wow.
That was way back in the earlier days. And then Mark was aware that people like myself were targeted for MK Ultra mind control. He was aware that the whole population was being slowly manipulated through the education system, through controlled media, information control. He knew it had come in with the traumatic event of the Kennedy assassination, what that did to our nation, given this new world order such grip. He knew that the pedophile agenda was a blackmail agenda, that it was a mind control agenda. and that children are going in and out of the White House and on the highest levels. He was livid. He was so mad. He decided he was going to do something about it. He wasn't the only one. There are other members in intelligence, especially, this was back in 1988 that Mark rescued my daughter and me right out of the Washington, D.C. swamp and handed me keys to my own mind. These secrets that were suppressed under national security are, again, our birthright. So this is information that we just simply need to remember is within us. We have within us the ability to heal from any trauma. We have within us the ability to heighten our immune system against any virus. We can control our own health to such a large degree. We can heal from physical tortures. We can heal from our bodies, minds, and spirits are so resilient. And what Mark, the keys that Mark handed me were reminders. And they empowered me to heal from within myself. Mark didn't deprogram me. He handed me the keys. And one of those keys was a pen. He said, write out your memory. Well, I was safe for the first time in my life, in spite of the fact that we were in a precarious situation and literally dodging bullets. My brain still knew I was safe with Mark. He was protecting my child. That's so new to me. So my brain knew, and it started opening up and the neuron pathways started firing. Plus, I was 30 years old, which is a time when many people have electrochemical changes in their brain, and repressed memory of their own childhood traumas will start to surface around that age. It's very, very common. And the fact that I was turning 30, I was also going to be killed at that point. But Mark, intercepted that and saved my life, saved my mind, and kept my daughter and I safe. And I was falling in love,
I can imagine.
Right from the get-go. And he said, I don't want a piece of you at once. I want all of you at once. I want you to heal first so you have something to give in a relationship. And boy, that was a great motive to heal. Love is the greatest healer. And that was my motive to heal. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't fear. It was love. It was love for my daughter and her situation. It was love for Mark. It was love for humanity and what I had witnessed and experienced behind the scenes of this new world order, what the plan was for everyone. It was that love that motivated me to speak out. So I began writing out my memory. And as it flashed, the neuron pathways would start to open up and the memory would flash out. And Mark told me, as soon as you see that on your mind screen, write it. You don't have to relive it. You don't have to, he said, you're not going to verbalize it, because if you talk about it, it reinforces it. Sometimes it causes more trauma. So Don't verbalize it, write it out. And what that does is it takes the logic part of the brain to move a pen. So it takes all this repressed, emotionally incomprehensible memory, shifts it over to logic, where it can be written out without being relived. And then it's consciously seen on the paper in front. So all of a sudden, I'm healing on all levels. I'm healing psychologically and psychiatrically all at once. And I'm reclaiming this brain space. And so this one thing, the pen is mightier than the sword, Mark said. Boy, he sure was right, because I just kept writing out my memory. And as fast as I wrote it out, since it was photographically, recorded in there, because we have that photographic memory surrounding trauma, I photographically remembered it, wrote it out in detail. He turned it over to concerned members of law enforcement and intelligence, especially U.S. Customs under William von Raab back in the day, a hero to us all. Check him out. He's amazing. He tried to tell us what was going on across the borders and tried to tell us about the drug and human trafficking funding the New World Order, but he didn't get a media voice back then either. And But still, the information was validated. And what was validated, we kept compiling that information and compiled it for my testimony for Congress, which I was going to present in 1995. Mm-hmm. And national security was invoked on my testimony so that Congress couldn't even hear that testimony. So we put it in book form, everything that had been validated. So Transformation of America was released for the purposes of providing that testimony for Congress, and clean members of Congress distributed it among the House and the Senate, and watchdog groups, all the different agencies, everything else. We got that information into everybody's hands, good, bad, or otherwise, because the bad guys needed to know I was remembering, and the good guys needed to know and with clarity exactly what was going on. So that's how Transformation of America came about. And that was in 1995. And in my testimony in Transformation of America, I detailed who was to become president, because elections have been rigged ever since the inception of electronic voting machines. And they were rigged for ushering in the New World Order, for putting people in key positions for bringing this about. So elections have been stolen ever since the inception of the electronic voting machines. And I knew that. They knew that. The perpetrators that I was exposed to, the Bushes and the Byrds, they didn't notice Democrat, Republican. There's no party line in this agenda. But those individuals, they didn't care about elections. They didn't worry about it. They knew they were going to be placed in those positions. So I knew that it was, as the New World Order was being ushered in, it was going to be kept in the Bush-Clinton dynasties. And Hillary Clinton was to be the one to usher it in 2016. That was the plan. It was a lengthy plan, and it's set up for generations. And yet so many people were awake and aware by 2016 that we overrode the rigged algorithm by sheer numbers of the electronic voting machine, and elected a president that represented we the people, a president who exposed the New World Order funding mechanism, a president who was showing what human trafficking was, closed the border, cut off their funding mechanism, and started exposing the swamp. Well, that doesn't make that president a god. It doesn't make him perfect in all things, in every breath he ever took and ever will take. But he did that. He woke people up. We should all be grateful for that, political or otherwise, just as a person having a voice to say, wake up, people. There's human trafficking going on. Wake up, people. Mind control is an agenda for ushering in a new world order. And you are going to be slaves in that society unless you protect your personal and national sovereignty.
I'm interested to ask you to circle back to Michael Aquino and Mark Phillips working at the War University at the same time. Who was doing the research that Mark found? Was that through... was there like a specific program or project where that research was being done to deprogram soldiers who had been tortured?
It was just pretty much in archives in mind sciences, and there were a few key people who would know what was going on. It was more people passing information person to person on that level than anything, because that was outside the box of the New World Order agenda. So we've got good and bad in politics. We had a lot of good people on the inside. They don't get voice either. If they get voice, they're usually shut down, demonized. Media can make it anything they want to. Obviously, it forced these perpetrators to step up their game. So 2020, they used mind control masked as a virus on a global scale to traumatize humanity, so that then we were told to limit the oxygen to our brain with a mask because we need that oxygen for critical analysis, free thought. Mm-hmm. And we had to hide behind that mask, which depersonalizes. The masks are used in MK Ultra mind control. So I was very much familiar with that. I knew what was going on. And then they told people shelter at home. And while they sheltered at home, they watched their TV with the traumatic ticker tapes and the violence, and being told that watching our cities and our livelihoods burn as peaceful protests, and people defending their lives were violent. It's they started doing the satanic reversal, this twist. And when we understand the how the subconscious works and how it was being manipulated, it's easy to see how people became so compliant to allow for the blatant steal of elections. And you'll notice once those elections were stolen 2020, first thing they did, fling open the border back to their funding mechanism of drug and human trafficking. So, we start to see this agenda. All politics aside, we've gained some knowledge. We gained an awareness, and it started a mass awakening. And this great awakening is on a global scale. It's huge. I've waited my whole life for it. It's amazing to get to see it. Just like I could recognize mind control being imposed on humanity, I also saw the mistakes that they made in the process because they were so frantic. When they told people to shelter at home, for example, it broke the routines.
Yeah.
When you break people's routines and their patterns, it forces their brain to fire in new ways.
Exactly.
And once their brains are firing in new ways, they start seeing things around them. They're talking with their children and found out what they were being indoctrinated with in the school system. They started seeing and that woke people up. So they've made a lot of mistakes. And in their mistakes, they accelerated people waking up to face the truth, embrace the truth, and start taking responsibility for their own lives. People began to realize, hey, big government's not going to save us from this. Big government's doing it to us.
Wow, that was really, really amazing.
What a warrior.
I am so impressed by her and her ability to share her story and how thoughtful and forthcoming she is, because I am sure there are many, many, many people, male and female, who have been through the exact same thing that she went through and don't have the fortitude to share their story.
She names names too. Wow. It's amazing. She must have some hardcore guardian angels, because that she is still with us and able to share all of this stuff and not pull any punches whatsoever. It's amazing. It's very inspiring.
Yeah, I think that the thing that is so cool is that it's easy to feel like that we are outnumbered, because the people that are quote unquote in control seem like they're locked in and they're not going anywhere, but they're not focused on her. They're focused on their own agenda. So I think that's what empowers her, is that she's just operating at a higher rate and a higher frequency than they are. And I think that's what's protecting her, is that she's not, even though she's named names, she's not going after anybody. She's not trying to, confront anyone. She's just telling her story.
And I like that she does make the point that they are so few. I think the way that illusion is perpetrated, that they're so ubiquitous, is that they're at all the bottlenecks. They own the media outlets. They control the entertainment industry. They sponsor and are sponsored by the medical industrial complex. It's easy to think that just because they're at the top of these pyramids, that they are the pyramids, but they are nothing without all of the levels below them kind of upholding their position. So I think I think that's a good point to make, because it's easy to think when you start searching into this stuff, delving into it, that the world is full of these creepy, evil people who are out to undermine everything that we hold good and dear. But that's simply not the case. They're just the ones that we see. Those are the figureheads.
Yeah, I think the cool thing that I got out of our talk was that it's really about your own energy and your own joy and your own connection with the world around you. Mm-hmm. And so much of what I've seen when I've looked behind that curtain and I've seen these power players and I've interacted with these people is they're fucking miserable. These are not happy people. They're not walking around in a state of joy. They have so much toxicity that they are, just because they're imbued with evil, that's the energy that they perpetuate.
Exactly.
And so if you look at someone who's wealthy or you look at someone who's famous and you think that that's aspirational, that's so misguided, because these people are miserable. Mm-hmm. They're fearful. They're negative. They're suspicious. They live in this world that everyone is the enemy. And she's right when she said, and they don't like us. Yeah. They really don't.
Well, they don't like themselves. That's exactly why they behave that way. They have a perpetual void to fill that when you have that kind of a void, it's never going to get filled. So that's why I think sometimes with certain people, it goes darker and darker and darker, because you view life as a series of kicks, of thrills, and as soon as you get bored of one thing, you move on to the next thing, including power, including what you used to value as good and true. That goes to the wayside. And then, everything becomes objectified as something that's going to help you fill the void or something that's going to be in the way of you trying to fill your void.
Yeah. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the more you perpetuate that negative energy, the deeper you get in that, the more you feel like that is what is reality. Mm-hmm. And again, it's this suspicion of the world and this hatred of the world. And that's no place to be. I think this whole zombie apocalypse narrative and this whole zombie narrative is really about, again, this low frequency energy of seeing people as being the undead and seeing them walking around kind of zombified and assuming that that's the world, that that's what the world is, or that's what the world is going to become. And it's not. Again, these are all devices that are used to control people, and you can co-sign on that and live in that world, or you can rip up that pay bill and don't contribute to that.
Exactly.
And so I think that's where imagery is really important and symbology is really important, and not aligning yourself with things that are negative, because that's not raising your spirit. That's not fulfilling or satisfying. I think that fear, because it is such a low frequency, is very easy to tune into and to tap into, but it doesn't mean that that's the right thing to do.
Yeah. It's more of a reaction, and then you can choose what to do with that reaction. So there's some situations where fear is a good thing. It helps you to get out of that situation or to take action so that whatever you're fearing stops. But to be in a perpetual state of fear, I mean, we've been simmering in that stew for the last 2.5 years, and look what it's produced.
Yeah.
I mean, fortunately, in some areas that has sort of gone down and the heat has been turned off for the most part, or lowered considerably, but it's not good. And it has turned people who used to be likable folks into people who point fingers at others and try and shame them, and putting them in one category and putting themselves in another category. And it's simplistic divide and conquer. So simple, just in a different context.
Yeah.
Just something else cut and pasted into it.
I just feel that it's so important to really resonate with what Mark Phillips taught or shared with her, which was voice no negatives without a solution. That is such a good mantra, because it's easy to drill into the world being messed up and people being messed up and bad things happening. And it's easy to get caught up in that. But how do we fix it? That's the most important aspect. And the way we fix it is fixing our own ecosystem. It's fixing ourselves. It's healing ourselves. It's looking within and not anticipating that the outside world is in control of us, because it's not. Hillary Clinton is not at my door and is never going to be at my door. These dark artists are only as powerful as, or take up only as much space as we give them. So I'm not going to allow those energies to penetrate me. I'm not going to allow that stuff to be a part of my story. It's not.
I suddenly thought of an episode that happened in 1989 where I was interviewing the legendary Pink Dots for a zine that I was doing at the time, and we were going out to eat at a Mediterranean restaurant in Kansas City. And Edward Caspell, the singer for the band, was talking about how Hitler wouldn't have gotten anywhere if people would have just laughed at him instead of following his orders. And it sounded very simplistic at the time, but really kind of that's what it boils down to is, what you resist, it persists. So in a sense, if you keep giving things like that energy, then it's certainly not going to go away, at least in your ecosystem. And that's the one that counts. So if you can't do anything about it, then do something about what you can do something about. And that's improving yourself and improving your immediate surroundings. And that will spiral out. If everybody was improving their immediate surroundings, then our less immediate surroundings would be affected.
I think if Hitler would have gotten into art school, none of that stuff would have happened.
There's a movie about that. And the guy that I think plays the young Hitler who is the guy that was in Flirting, also in the Tom Cruise.
Oh, yeah.
What's his name? I can never think of his name. Noah something, right?
Fielding Mellish, I think, is his name.
What? That's a brand of jam, I think. Fielding Mellish? What? That's brilliant.
Woody Allen character name.
Oh, it is? Okay. Oh, gosh. I love it. Okay. Fielding Mellish. No, it's Noah something. I'm not sure what it is. But
Noah Mellish.
That's a Yiddish market down the street, isn't it?
It's a Yiddish jam.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, folks, I suppose that's a good place to draw it to a close. Thank you all so very much for listening. Hopefully you were as inspired and awestruck by Cathy as we were. Man, incredible interview. I highly suggest seeing her documentary, which you can rent or buy on the website that she gave, and the links will be in the episode notes. You save the yawns for afterwards.
I'm not yawning. I'm breathing.
Turn off your...
I'm heavily breathing.
Turn off your mic in reverse. I'm heavily inhaling. Yes. And if you want to contact us with suggestions for guests or whatever.
Casserole recipes.
You can contact us at either the Melt podcast at protonmail.com
or Hunter Muse. Oh, no, I mean Hunter-Muse at protonmail.com.
And there are places to get Melt merch and lots of different arenas that we post stuff in, and all the links will be in the episode notes.
You got it.
Thank you all so much for listening. We really appreciate you.
And we love you.
We love you, and we hope we're doing good work. If you would like to contribute to our cause, that will get you extra episodes, extended episodes, and early episodes, and access to monthly Melt meetups, which are very fun and therapeutic. Until next time, take care, y'all.
Ta-ta.
To hear the full-length version of this episode, get access to exclusive and early episodes, and participate in our monthly Zoom meetups for as little as $3 per month, just click the Patreon link in the episode notes or visit patreon.com/themeltpodcast. Contributing financially will help to make this podcast my full-time gig that I can devote more time to and allow me to create more content. Other ways of contributing would be giving us a favorable review or rating wherever you get your podcasts, subscribing to us on YouTube, spreading the word wherever you and your tribe congregate, or just by sending us your positive thoughts and intentions. In a quantumly intertwined and holographic multiverse, these also go a long way. Thank you.